All right, hello everybody. I think I finally have my lights set up in this tiny apartment in a way that actually makes me look not quite like a ghost, but also not hiding in the dark. It's a nice, happy medium, and I'm so excited because maybe I can finally leave this one where it is right now, and I don't have to constantly move stuff around. So frustrating. Anyway, so I'm going to make another quick video. Well, the last one wasn't that quick, but hopefully this one will be even more quick. This is just another kind of meta topic or introductory topic. I'm going to talk a little bit about reading standard music notation and some tips for how to do that in general and specifically how it relates to the guitar. Why as an introductory topic? Just because like most of the stuff that I'm doing for this, I'm trying to complete an introductory section and then 9 course sections expanded from a course that I did for learnassist.com during the pandemic, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of out of time. I'm just doing whatever I feel like at the time, but there's a whole kind of syllabus already written out that I'm just going through however I feel like it. But anyway, standard music notation doesn't quite fit into any of the later sections because they're mostly designed for beginners to intermediate players, and sight reading standard notation is more of an advanced topic, I would say, at least for most guitar players. If you're a piano player or a violinist or something like that, even 6-year-olds can read standard music notation. But anyway, guitar players, let's see if we can dive in, shall we? So, reading standard notation, guitar players are going to be reading the treble clef. I'm going to put some pictures up over here. Enjoy pictures. Enjoy. I don't know, I'm just in a goofy mood for some reason. Treble clef, we have lines. We have the lines E, G, B, D, F. A great way to memorize these lines and those letters is to make some kind of, mnemonic device. Make a sentence that fits the letters. So you could say every giant bear deserves fudge. Just make something up. Make something funny. Be creative. I made one today that says eels gyrate better than flamingos. It's true if you think about it. Eels definitely can gyrate. Anyway, that's the lines of the treble clef. Every good boy does fine, every giant bear deserves fudge, eels gyrate better than flamingos, E, G, B, D, F, from the low line to the top line. The spaces of the treble clef are F, A, C, E. That just spells face. That's a little bit easier to remember. So E, G, B, D, F, F, A, C, E. Lines and spaces, treble clef. All right, something to remember is that the guitar is technically a transposing instrument, but in a more simple way than, say, a B-flat trumpet or an E-flat alto saxophone or something. If that's confusing, we don't have to get too deep into it. The point is, some instruments, what you read on the page is not what you hear. Guitar is the same, but it does it in a simple way. It just does it by octave. So what you are reading on the page, when you play it on guitar, it actually sounds an octave down. That means that the guitar would actually be heard in probably the bass clef. Why don't we read it in the bass clef? Because its range, its playable, useful range, doesn't really fit into the bass clef very easily when you're reading it. So you read it in treble clef because it usually fits within the treble clef quite easily while reading. So anyway, just remember that compared to a piano player, if you play what is written as your middle C on guitar, it's actually an octave lower than what a piano player would be playing for middle C on their instrument. This is hard for arrangers to keep track of, by the way. So if you, for example, do a cruise ship gig for 5 months with an unknown and shall remain unstated cruise line and talent agency, you might have to read charts that constantly are flipping back and forth between octave up, octave down, octave up, octave down, continually in every chart, on every page. Oh, the fun we can have. So anyway, it's just something to remember. So if you're reading a part, you have to, that's not to denigrate arrangers or composers. If you're reading a part for guitar and you're in like a high school jazz ensemble or a college jazz ensemble and something just doesn't look right because it's like, wait, I was up there and now I'm down here, whatever. Just trust your ear. Like, it doesn't mean that they're a bad arranger. It just means like they have, you know, depending on the size of the ensemble, somewhere between 15 and 20 other parts that they have to get through, right? So if they forgot which octave they were riding the guitar in for a moment, like give them a break and just trust your ear and make it fit. Like if it was in the same, you know, if you're doubling another part, match their octave. If you were in one octave earlier, it's like it's probably going to be in the same octave. You know, if it's probably not meant to flip back and forth all the time, but you can, you know, you can ask the arranger if you need clarification. So anyway, guitar is a transposing instrument. Just remember that it sounds down an octave. Cool. Okay. So here's some tips for sight reading. This is not even close to comprehensive. This is just some general tips. So first, bedrock, rhythm. The most important rhythms that you need to understand are whole, half, quarter, and eighth notes. If you could just perfectly sight read a whole bunch of different rhythms that use whole, half, quarter, and eighth notes, you'd be ahead of 99.9% of musicians out there, certainly. But 99.999% of guitar players, definitely. Focus on that. Sometimes you're going to find 16th notes in charts, especially if it's like, if it's a style of music that's typically typically subdivided in 16ths. So like a funk style, a rock style, you might read charts in 16th notes. But other than that, like smaller, like 32nd notes, 64th notes, you'll find that in some really old classical music sometimes, because sometimes they would write, instead of writing a fast tempo with large subdivisions, they would write like a really slow tempo. It's like, this is Largo. And then they'd have a bunch of like 64th and 128th notes written in it. It's just like, that seems really weird from a modern performance practice and composer's practice mindset. It's like, why would you do that? Just speed up the tempo and make it easier to read. So anyway, master your whole, half, quarter, and eighth notes, and then dive into 16ths. Smaller than that, it's like, yeah, if it's specific to your style of music or your instrument, go for it. So here's some tips on when you're reading rhythms, because the rhythm is the most important thing. You could play almost, I wouldn't suggest this in a professional context, but you could almost improvise any note you want as long as you nail the rhythm. And everyone's going to be like, sounds like he knows what he's doing. That was, what was that? F sharp? G natural? I don't know, whatever, it sounded right. So play the rhythms right, play with confidence, play with good time, good tone, time, tone, and taste. And yeah, the notes aren't always, the exact pitches are the least, they're not unimportant, but they're probably last in priority. Anyway, so while reading rhythms, here's what you should focus on. Focus on the large pulse of the music, okay? So I'll talk about time signature here in a second, but if it's in like a 6/8 time signature, you have two compound pulses. One lolly, two lolly, one triplet, two triplet, dot, 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 dot. So you have two clear halves of the measure, right? Make sure you have the first pulse correct. Make sure you have the second pulse correct. And that's one measure done, and then your eyes can flow through to the next one. I just mean if you can clearly visually delineate where is the midpoint so that you know I have this set of rhythms and then that set of rhythms, this set of rhythms and that. It makes it a lot more, it makes it a lot easier to follow with your eyes and just keep reading. So that was an example for 6/8. If we have if it was 4/4 time, 4 quarter notes, same thing. Just think of it as like whatever rhythm is in the first half of the measure, whatever rhythm is in the second half of the measure. A great composer or arranger is going to write the music this way, right? So they're not going to cross, if they have to cross the middle of the measure, they're going to use a tie rather than like a dotted note or something. They're only going to use a dotted note if it's in the beginning or the end. If they're writing if they're trying to make it easier for you, the instrumentalist, to sight read, that's what they're going to do. So focus on that. If it's music written by a great composer, they'll do it for you, and you just have to keep paying attention to it in that way. So 6/8, half and half. 4/4, half and half. If it's 3/4, that should actually be like a triple duple meter, right? No, sorry, triple meter that is simple instead of compound. So 1 and 2 and 3 and etc. 3 main pulses and 2 parts. So for that, again, just focus on each main downbeat. Think of it as 3 main pulses. Figure out what's happening in each of those little sub-segments of the measure, and you'll be fine. Okay, so then what if it's in like 5 or 7, something a little bit more complex? This is when you need to use your musicianship. Find out while you're reading through, if you're like pre-reading and you're like, what is the main theme of this? Find out, does it feel, if it's in 5, does it feel like a 3 and then 2? Or is it a 2 plus 3? That's kind of harder to feel. Usually it's 3 plus 2. 2 plus 3 is possible though. Because again, a composer who is focused on making music sight readable will pick one of those and stick to it. If they're trying to do something more artistic, then they might shift around. And then that's going to require a rehearsal, right? Because you can't expect musicians to guess what your next rhythmic grouping is going to be. It's like you have to know. So anyway, find out if it's 3 plus 2 or 2 plus 3 if it's in 5. If it's in 7, same thing. Is it 4 plus 3 or is it 3 plus 4? Two, 3, 4, or figure out the subdivision first. 4 plus 3, 3 plus 4. It should probably stay consistent unless they're doing something more artistically, in which they'll probably need to rehearse with you. Okay, that's, again, just kind of focusing on what is the first half, what is the second half of the measure, but it's asymmetric. You just have to keep up with the asymmetry. So, like a literary metaphor or connection, this would be called chunking, right? Like literally, it's not a joke. So it'd be called chunking in if you're reading English. This is how you teach kids how to read. Well, past the point of sounding out words, etc., then you get into how to read through a sentence, and you have to focus on a skill called chunking, which means you're separating a sentence into digestible chunks rather than each individual word. So if you read a lot, you get into the process of just kind of like focusing on how much could I say in a breath, and your eyes follow that much, and then you move on. You can get to the point, like I'm not saying I'm the best at this. I'm always trying to get better at it, but you can get to the point when you're reading music that you do the same thing, that you separate it into digestible chunks. You can read like a whole phrase, or at least half of a phrase, like an antecedent part of a phrase pair. You can get to the point where you're reading ahead and you're digesting that whole chunk at a time and playing it, then moving on. Obviously, it's easier to do that with simpler music first, right? So if you're practicing sight reading, like try not to go too far outside of your own ability. It should be, if you're able to get like 80 to 90% right, that's probably the best place for you to be to grow when you're sight reading. If you're getting less than half of it right, like you need to go to simpler music or you need to slow down. If you're not making any mistakes, well then you're not really practicing your reading skills, you're just playing. You're just having fun, or you're kind of rehearsing something if you're not making any mistakes. Okay, so I kind of assumed that you knew what a time signature was when I talked about focusing on which half of a measure that you're visually tracking. So anyway, just remember, keep in mind, a time signature is not a fraction. Time signature is just number of beats per measure, and then another number designating visually on the page what keeps track of each beat. 4/4, you have 4 beats in a measure. That's the important thing. Like the top number is really what you mostly need to focus on. How many beats are in a measure? Second number is just like, if it's a 4, then each beat is a quarter note. If it's a 2, each beat is a half note. If it were a 1, it would be each beat is a whole note. If it were an 8, each beat is an eighth note, etc., etc., etc. So keep that in mind. It's not a fraction. Reading key signatures. So this could be its own topic. Again, I'm just kind of trying to blaze through this and give you some basic tips. Key signatures, how to learn them. I like how Victor Wooten describes this, and he got this from some other clinician at one of his clinics, I believe. In a video, he talks about it. So if you're trying to learn all the different key signatures, major and minor key signatures around the circle of fifths, etc., just keep in mind there are actually 30 keys. Why 30? You have up to 7 sharps, you have up to 7 flats, and then you have no sharps and no flats, right? 7 plus 7 is 14, plus the one that has the key signature with no sharps or flats is 15. And then if you double that, because you have major keys and minor keys, that's 30. 30 different ways to write major and minor key signatures. Well, 15 major, 15 minor. Okay, this is for specifically classical style major and minor key signatures using functional harmony only. Okay, so we're not talking about modes or anything else. We're talking about specifically how you designate a major scale or a minor scale with a key signature. So if you have trouble memorizing, just flip the sharps and flats. And again, I'm stealing this from Victor Wooten. Any great idea in music is worth stealing. That's for sure. Anyway, every scale has 7 separate notes. Think of it that way. If it's major or minor scale, again, classical functional harmony, you have 7 separate notes. If they're all natural, then it's C. Like I'm just talking about major for now. So if it's all natural, it's C major. If you have 7 sharps, it's C sharp major. If you had 7 flats, it's C flat major. That's kind of easy to think about. It's all the notes up 1 or down 1 half step, 1 fret on the guitar. If you had 1 sharp, this is like the secret sauce here. 1 sharp and 6 naturals is the key of G. What is 1 natural and 6 flats? It's the key of G flat. What note makes it G instead of G major instead of C major, G flat major instead of C flat major? It's the same note, F. If you add a sharp to F and make it F sharp, your key is now the key of G major. If you raise F flat to F natural and everything else is still flat, now you have the key of G flat major. So as long as you're adding up to 7, you just keep track of how many naturals versus sharps, how many naturals versus flats. And that makes it easier, because then you can keep track. G and G flat are actually very similar. So here's another example. If my screen doesn't go away. Here's another example. 2 sharps. 2 sharps is D major, but just think of it, it's 2 sharps and 5 naturals, 7 notes. 2 sharps, 5 naturals is the key of D. 2 natural notes with 5 flats, again, 7 notes, 2 naturals and 5 flats is the key of D flat. So instead of having to make some like weird mnemonic device, you can just think of it as math. Like as long as you keep, like you might need to do some mnemonic devices to get started, and check out some other descriptions that other very intelligent people have made for that. But I think this is my favorite way that I've seen anyone describe it. Again, I'm just stealing it from Victor Wooten. You just make sure that the notes are adding up to 7, and you can see how G and G flat are actually the same, D and D flat are actually the same. Like it's easier to keep track that way. So that works for all keys, so you can work it out for all the others if you wish. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about specifically practicing like sight reading on the guitar itself. So for guitar, my advice is practice in multiple positions on the instrument, position playing. So it's like you're in open or first position. Your first finger is near the first fret. I guess I could have a guitar here, but whatever, we'll do that next time. If your first finger is near the first fret, you're in first position. If your first finger is near the fifth fret, you're in fifth position. That's the simple way that you describe it for guitar instead of upright bass or something like that. Okay, so you should memorize your notes based on different positions, but you should also think of it by interval. Like when you learn a scale shape and you're in one position, you should try to think of it as like, I know where my root is, or my third, or my fifth, etc., and where the scale notes are in between. Because sight reading on guitar is a lot like sight singing, because you have a shape and then it just kind of slides around to different keys, rather than on piano, each key having a separate shape. Or, saxophone. Saxophone, you have a separate shape based on a pattern of keys that you press down, right? The keys that control the pads. So anyway, it's important to know the intervals rather than only memorizing the exact notes of each string, because the guitar feels so relative compared to a piano or something like that. And because of the way that you play the guitar, the way that you use slurs on the guitar, you have hammer-ons, you have pull-offs, you have slides. So you will have to change your fingerings based on how the phrase is articulated. So if you had a written piece of music in front of you that had a very specific way that it was articulated, you might have to change your hand around to make it possible to articulate it that way. Oh, this note is slurred here, but then I have to jump back down here to pluck the next note. Then I have to tap hammer on into another note to slur there. Like the guitar, for articulation on the guitar, legato phrasing on the guitar, slurs on the guitar is a very specific thing that you often have to make up combinations of right and left hand techniques that might fit just one phrase of a melody. If you're, like if you're trying to play a Charlie Parker melody, it's like you often, like if you stay in one place, like you can make it easier for your fingers, but it's not going to sound like bebop articulation unless you do more, unless you go deeper and think about, well, how can I get this legato, how can I get all these legato notes to come out of my fingers, etc. So anyway, that's a deeper level that you can go when you're sight reading on guitar. You shouldn't just think about, well, where's the easiest place to play this? No, where's the place on the guitar you can play this so that you can articulate it appropriately and it actually sounds good too, tone-wise. Because if you play it in a low register, it might be too bright. If you play it in a high register, it might be too dark, etc., etc. Okay, this is just a random tip. If you're truly sight reading, meaning like you have to just keep looking through the page, you don't have any part of this memorized. If you're truly sight reading, try to focus on only the page rather than splitting attention between the page and the guitar, because this is where you will most likely get lost. So if you have the music in front of you, I have a music stand here, even though you can't see it. Let's say that I have some music in front of me. A lot of, like me included, I'm the first to admit I've done this all the time. If you're sight reading something and you're like, okay, I'm reading. Oh, where do I go next? As soon as you do this, as soon as you stop paying attention to what's on the page and you start looking at your hand to check, to make sure you're in the right place, you're probably just going to get lost, unless it's like at a really clear rehearsal marking or a section of the music or a phrase. It's like as soon as you're here, and then you try to go back, it's like you're probably behind, bro. So just keep your eyes on the page and feel where you are and remember where you are. So it's like if you ended your phrase on a G note on the fifth string with your pinky finger, and then the phrase moves on the next page, it's like you don't have to check where your hand is. Like you can feel if you're crossing strings, you can feel if you need to shift, do the trick where it's like you move between the fourth finger to the first. It's like, oh, I'm gonna slide in a way that I feel my first finger landing on that exact same note, so then I can feel how far to stretch for the note that's higher. You do it by feel so that you don't have to look at your hand. I would still, again, there's always going to be exception to every rule or even little small piece of advice in music, and probably everything else in life too. I would look at my guitar if I had to do a really big position shift. It's like, oh, the melody is all down here, and then suddenly it's like an octave up, and it only works by like literally moving 12 frets higher rather than just a slightly higher position, depending on the key signature, right? That might be required. So in those cases, yeah, but then I'm probably gonna like mark it in my music if it's, again, if I have the ability to, and it's not just completely sight reading for the first time. I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, this is the part where I gotta jump up here. And you can just make just a small thing of like, a classical guitarist would write this with a Roman numeral symbol above the page, which means that's a position marking, right? So it's like suddenly it's like you got 14 written in, like, oh, first finger, 14th fret, and then boom, you're back to the page. Anyway, small piece of advice, keep your eyes on the page. That's it for now. I will talk about methods to memorizing the notes on the fretboard more in depth later, because that actually will fit into my kind of beginner and intermediate focus course stuff, and you can apply that to sight reading when I will probably talk more about sight reading later when I do some more advanced videos after I get through redoing this whole course that I did for like beginners and intermediates. But just for a preview, you should memorize the notes by position first and then by playing one string scales. You can actually do that at the same time, but I'll explain more what I mean. For now, focus on learning the treble clef and remember all these basic words of advice. So you've got lines and spaces, the guitar sounds an octave down, focus on whole, half, quarter, and eighth notes first, then later sixteenths. When you're reading rhythms, focus on the first and second half of a measure, no matter what the time signature is. If it's an odd time signature, that just means you have to split it asymmetrically. Remember your time signature is not a fraction. Key signature, 30 keys. Just make sure that your notes are adding up to 7. So D major and D flat major are actually the same. You either have 2 sharps and 5 naturals, or 2 naturals and 5 flats. For a guitar, practice in multiple positions. Think of it sort of like sight reading. Remember that you're going to often have to move around to articulate a phrase correctly. When you're sight reading, focus only on the page. Try to not look at your guitar unless you're doing a very clear position shift. And we'll talk more about how to memorize the notes on the fretboard later. That's a complete review, I think, of what I just said. All right, thanks a lot. Take care. Thanks for watching. Bye.